Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to look at certain problems of groundwater. Groundwater can be replenished by rain as long as there is enough rain to cover the needs that's being taken out of the ground. So if you take out water out of the ground faster, then it can be recharged. And recharged is the term that's used when water percolates back down into the ground and replaces the water that's been taken out of a well or an irrigation pump or something like that. If you take water out faster than the recharge rate, then you're causing major damage, and you can actually run out of water. It's very possible that wells can run dry, and that people that need that water, their land and their house and everything is essentially useless if they don't have a source of water. It's something you absolutely need. Also, you can contaminate wells. Well water, groundwater, can be contaminated by various ways, and so these are things important to think about in terms of your own property and your neighbor's property. So let's look at some examples. Groundwater is considered renewable as long as the rate that the rain replaces the groundwater is the same as the rate that you're using the groundwater. If you use less or the same amount, then it's renewable. If you use more than can be restored, then it's not renewable and you can actually run out of it. You're going to see that in some cases, the entire ground can sink if you take water out of the ground, because the groundwater is part of the structure of the ground. And if you remove the water, then you have spaces that water used to occupy, and the weight of the ground can actually crush, or you can subside. Ground can subside. We'll look at that in a second. You can also contaminate wells. So well contamination can happen from various ways, and we'll look at some of those ways too. The first thing we're going to look at is land subsidence. And subsidence means to sink. So if something subsides, it goes under. So what's happened in this case, you've got a very big valley in California. So you have the high mountains to the east of it, and you have a few mountains and the Pacific Ocean to the west. Those high mountains have lots of snow, and so you do have drainage into this valley, and it's very rich and fertile, and it is most of the vegetables that you get in the grocery store are from this valley in California. The problem is California generally gets lots of snow in the upper mountains in the north, beside the Oregon border, and in the Sierras to the east of this valley, and so there is lots of snow. But what you also have is high population centers in Los Angeles in the south and in San Francisco in the west. And all of this rainwater, snow water, is being diverted to the cities. You also have a huge agricultural district in the valley. So what has happened is that over the years, the groundwater has been taken out at a much faster rate than it's restored, because this is dry area. There's not a lot of rain in California. That's why people love the weather in California. It doesn't rain very much, but because it doesn't rain, the water is not restored to the ground. So this is a poll. This picture was taken in the 70s. So from 1925 to 1977, that is how much that the entire valley has sunk. Okay, so they've got a position there in 1925. That was where the whole ground level was. Okay, that's 30 feet. That from 1925 to 1977, which is about 50 years. In 50 years, the entire valley, huge valley, has sunk 30 feet, because that 30 feet was water under the ground that made the ground at that level. Well, the water has been pumped out faster than it was ever restored, because it doesn't rain very much in this valley, and that's called land subsidence, right? The second thing that we're going to look at is contamination. And if you have say, this is an example of a septic tank, there's all kinds of things. Someone is dumping chemicals or pouring oil, or that there's waste material from a mine or from a an oil well or a gas well, that can get into the rock. And especially if you have limestone, if you are sitting on top of limestone, and lots of this area has limestone in it, well, that limestone can form small or large caverns, spaces, voids under the ground that's containing water. Okay, so it acts like little cisterns or little wells. If you were to contaminate that and it cracks through, see, because there's all kinds of cracks in this limestone because the water has acid in it from carbonic acid from carbon dioxide, and as it percolates through the ground, it opens up these spaces. Well, these spaces allow contaminated water. This is an example of a septic tank that is leaking, and as that septic tank leaks, it gets into the well water, and then the well from the neighbor is now contaminated. All right, so that's their own well probably is also contaminated, and the well of the neighbor is contaminated. Now, this would happen in a relatively short time because it's not really gotten down into the water table. It only gets in the water table right at the end in this example because this is days or weeks. What could happen over the long time is that the land can, in some ways, heal itself in limited ways. So let's imagine that this septic tank continues to leak, and now the water, the contaminated water that is, rainwater that's leaking through these rocks, that has this contamination in it, gets down further into the water table. Because it's percolating through the sandstone, which is permeable, it moves really, really slowly. And because it's moving slowly through these rocks, the rocks are actually cleaning the water. That's the reason why most wells are very clean. Even if the water that rains on it is not perfectly clean, the rocks themselves act as a water purifier. So it is possible that if the contamination can be moved through rocks very, very slowly, then the rocks can actually clean the water. If they don't, if they are going along like at the top picture where they're going along very quickly through cracks in the rocks, then it would be a contamination. When a well is contaminated, it's either impossible to clean it, or the repair would have to be made to the other person's house. Well, that's a problem. If my well is contaminated, how do I make someone else do what they're supposed to do? So a lot of times you end up with government and even suing people in order to get the neighbors to do what they have to do. Otherwise, you have no well water. Either case, this is a serious problem and can affect yourself, can affect the public health, and your neighbors aren't too happy with you.